My name is Ryan Clinton. I'm an attorney in town and was also part of the no-kill political movement to make Austin, Texas a no-kill city. I also helped with my wife, helped start Austin Pets Alive with Dr. Jefferson in a small group back in 2008. And it's just my honor and my privilege to welcome you here today. One of the things that makes you, like other conferences do, but more than that, our goal is to empower you, to literally give you the tools that you need to start saving lives the day that you get back home from the conference. That is our goal. We have two new emphases this year. The first is we went to a track method. So there are 3 tracks for those of you who are interested in attending sessions. You can attend any session you want. You're not limited to any particular track. But we gave you tracks for political activists, for leaders, and for those who want to implement policy, because those were the 3 categories of people that we saw as inherent and critical to making a no-kill community. The second emphasis that we have this year, more so than any previous year, is a reliance on data. We want you to take a hard look at the data in your community and to use that data to A, be transparent and open and honest with the public, but also to laser light focus your efforts on saving the animals that are being killed. And you will only know that if you take a hard look at your data. You can only know what the most important programs and policies are if you take a very hard look at your data to see what is being killed. Now, before I begin, I want to introduce a few special guests. Can you guys come on up here? I want to introduce Dr. Ellen Jefferson of Austin Pets Alive and American Pets Alive. Leanne Shenefil, formerly of Austin Animal Center, now of Best Friends Animal Society. Kimberly McNeely, who is our interim Animal Services Chief Officer here in Austin. Thank you, Kimberly. Mary Smith, where's Mary? Are you here? Yeah, come on up here, Mary. Mary from Maddie's Fund, who has helped funding this whole thing. And then we are so fortunate to have the mayor of Austin come welcome you here today. Steve Adler, I have to tell you, there has never been a time when we have gone to Steve Adler and the answer hasn't been yes. Every time we have needed to reinforce our commitment to no-kill, every time that we have needed the city's help, Mayor Adler has been there. And not only has he helped to maintain Austin's no-kill success, but under Leanne's leadership and under the mayor's leadership, Austin has gone from a 94 to a 97 to a 98% save rate for all impounded animals this past year, and I want to thank the mayor for doing that. Do you mind just welcoming the audience here with a few thoughts?
Oh, I'd love to. Hey everybody, welcome to Austin. I understand that most folks here are from other parts of Texas, but that we have some folks from California and even abroad. Welcome to a place that we think is magical. You're in a city where so many things are happening right at so many levels. And when we take a look at what it is that makes that happen, it really comes back to the people that live here and the quality of life and the culture that exists in the city. I mean, the reason the economy is good is because the people that companies want to hire want to live in Austin, Texas, so that they come here. Those kinds of things happen because of the values that a community has, that they express. So Austin takes really great pride in that we're an environmentally forward community. And we really push on issues like climate change mitigation, that we're a welcoming community. But one of the really big aspects that are part of our DNA, part of what it is that brands us as a city because it's reflective of who we are, is that we're a no-kill city. It happens because of the people that live here. But when I talk to my colleagues as mayors, and they look at this program, more and more mayors, more and more people in cities, more and more city councils are beginning to look at these kinds of policies as something that not only is morally correct as we save animals, but it's also something that is a real priority from a municipal level. I want to thank you guys for being here. I mean, you guys are at the front lines of this effort in so many cities. It's really good to see that the room is not just being filled with activists and volunteers, but more and more we're seeing the city's participation, the formal shelter participation in communities, because that's the kind of transition that's so important for making sure that this lasts and expands. Make sure that while you're in Austin and enjoying this, you actually make it out to some of our food trucks. And this is the live music capital of the world, so make sure that you find some really good music. There are probably about 250 clubs tonight in various places with live music that's going on, with just phenomenal musicians. So have a great time and know that the work that you're doing is so incredibly important. Know that it took Austin, when we decided to do this, just 6 months to get to 90% no-kill. And since 2011, we've been able to maintain that and increase those numbers. It'd be really great if we get to the place where we were a no-kill country, and I think you guys are going to be able to do that. Welcome to Austin.
So, doesn't Mayor Adler have the greatest job on the planet? You know, the City of Austin motto is "Keep Austin Weird." How cool is that? And I'm from Oakland, where I think everything is hip, slick, and cool, but I think nothing really can replace the magic that is Austin. And so we'd like to recognize the City of Austin with the first ever Maddie's Community Award. And it's in recognition and honor and appreciation of all the work that's done here on behalf of advancing life-saving for the animals in this community, as well as the innovative leadership of the City of Austin for being a model no-kill city. Thank you, Mayor Adler, for your devotion to the area. Thank
You know, there are a lot of people that contribute and help make something like this happen, and Austin's effort is in part funded with the support from Maddie's Fund. So let's also applaud Maddie's Fund right now.
All right, so I'm going to be giving the opening presentation. So I was asked to present on Austin's no-kill story. But it turns out that over the years, what we have discovered in learning more and more and more about our story, but also everybody else's story, is that Austin's story is a lot less unique than we expected. Austin's story is, in fact, everybody's no-kill story. And everybody's no-kill story begins in absence, in darkness. Everybody's no-kill story begins in a place with the absence of hope, with the absence of vision, absence of knowledge, sometimes an absence of resources, an absence of desire. It begins in a place of darkness. Many of you probably can think back for yourselves of a period before you began engaging in no-kill efforts and what that was like. I know what it was like, and we're going to talk about my experience in a second. But my experience was not unique. So what is it that gets you out of darkness the fastest? A match. Friction and fuel is what gets you out of darkness. And so when we looked at other communities, in addition to the Austin community, to try to figure out what it was that started this movement, that got us pushing in the right direction, it was a match. Somebody lit a match. And it is so fascinating to know that we can never predict in advance who that is that's going to light that match. This is my friend Valerie Hayes. Valerie is a biologist, photographer, and Valerie was a volunteer back at Tompkins County SPCA back in the 1990s. And she volunteered over a long period of time. She volunteered in a period of time in which there was virtually no life-saving, that the volunteers did all of the heavy lifting at the shelter, and she got tired and she quit. But she went back a few years later because there had been these kind of rumors that they were going to go no-kill. And so she agreed, perhaps against her best wishes, to her best judgment, to foster a set, 5 of them, of bottle baby kittens. And so she takes them home, and she feeds them, and she gets them well, and she socializes them, and then she brings them back to the shelter to be placed into their adoption program. And every weekend, she goes to the shelter to volunteer, and she looks into the shelter system to figure out if they've been adopted. And the first weekend she goes there, and the first 2 have been adopted, and she is so happy. And the next weekend she goes back, and she looks again in the shelter system because she sees that they're not there, and she wants to know when they got adopted, and they didn't get adopted. They killed her kittens. They killed her kittens even though the kittens weren't sick. They killed her kittens even though they had a place to go to. They killed her kittens even though she had promised that if there was ever any need for her to go get them, that she would. They killed them out of convenience, and this is what she said. "I'm ashamed to say that my kittens died without names. I deliberately resisted naming them because I knew I'd be giving them up, and I thought it would be easier. I now consider that a mistake. They should have been known by names and not numbers." Valerie was the match that started the no-kill movement in America. Without Valerie Hayes, none of us might all not be in this room. Because Valerie Hayes started the match that led to regime change and shelter reform in Tompkins County, New York, which became the first no-kill community in America. Austin's story is everybody's story. This is my friend Jeff Daniels. Jeff, with his daughter. Jeff is a devoting father, a businessman, and he, like me, had no idea that his life would become about animals. Jeff went to lunch with his wife and his daughter, and when he was at lunch, somehow, still doesn't know, his 2 dogs, Jackson and Bella, got out of his backyard. And so they got out of the backyard, and the police were called because that was who did animal control. And the police went out, the sheriff, I think, went out. And a sheriff's deputy, everybody knows this, right? There are 2 types of dogs when they get out. There's the squiggly butt dogs who run straight up to you, and then there's the runners, right? There's 2 types of dogs. Well, Jackson was the squiggly butt dog who ran straight up to the sheriff, and he went straight into his car. Bella was the other type. She was a runner. And because this sheriff felt like he did not have time to gather Bella, he shot her. That was the match. That was Jeff Daniels' match. And then he became an animal advocate, and that shelter, too, later became a life-saving shelter. This is Ruth Ann Panapento. This one's hard. Ruth Ann was a volunteer in Williamson County, Texas, years ago, when Williamson County was, at best, an average animal shelter. But it was one in which they didn't take great pride, evidently, in cleaning. So the volunteers were left to clean the shelters. And Ruth Ann and a couple of her friends went to the shelter and spent all day cleaning. And as they had gone outside behind the shelter to clean some cat carriers, they stumbled upon a feral cat box that had a cat in it that had been there for 3 days in the 107-degree heat and died. An animal control officer had brought the cat in and left it on the back porch in the 170-degree heat. And Ruth Ann and her friends were the ones to find it. And they called me at 2 o'clock in the morning that night. I still don't know how they got my phone number. That was the match. That was the match that started Williamson County's efforts to be a no-kill community, and now they are one of the highest, most successful animal shelters in the entire United States. This is a 29-year-old dreamboat attorney. This is the first cat that he ever saved. He was not planning to be involved in animal welfare in any way, but he found a cat on his front porch, and he didn't know what to do with it, knew nothing about animal welfare, didn't know anything about spay-neuter, didn't know anything about vaccines, but he began this process of learning about animal welfare in Austin through this efforts with this cat. And so he does everything he can. He gets the cat altered, he gets it vaccinated, he adopts it out to a friend. But in that process, he learns that Austin is in fact not a safe place for animals. At the time, it turns out Austin was killing in 2005 14,304 animals. That's 40 a day, or 1 every 12 minutes that the animal shelter was open. And this is the article that young attorney read that year from the Austin Chronicle. It says, a 7-week-old kitten weighs about a pound. Its veins are the size of vermicelli. So if you're administering a lethal dose of sodium pentobarbital, an anesthetic agent blue as the summer sky, you'll probably inject directly into its round, spotted belly. If you have 5 cages of kittens to kill this morning, you don't have time to go looking for slippery little veins. A kitten with a hand gripping the scruff of its neck and a needle in its belly will squeal in terror. But once you've pulled out the needle and placed it back into its cage with its siblings, it will shake its head and start to get on with its kittenish business. Then it starts to look woozy, and it begins to stumble around. It licks its lips, tasting the chemical absorbed into its system. Soon it becomes too sedated to stand, it collapses, and when its lungs become too sedated to inflate, it stops breathing. The euthanasias begin shortly after 10 a.m. on a Wednesday in early October. By 10:30, the shelter is down a dozen cc's of pentobarbital, and 20 cats are dead. They lie stretched on their sides in a neat pile, heads towards the buzzing refrigerator that holds the medicine, feet towards the freezer that holds the dead. That was my match. And that began my journey to make Austin the safest place in America to be a homeless pet. And the reason that I talk about these things is that you're going to go to every other animal welfare conference in America and you're never going to hear that story. Because they all like to pretend that this stuff never happened. That this wasn't how we began this movement. That this wasn't how we started our no-kill efforts in every city. But that is a lie. This is how it begins. This is how it begins. This is the match. And what you find when you're willing to light one match in a dark room is that there's a lot of other matches around you. And that's what Valerie Hayes found. She found out that it hadn't just happened to her, it happened to a whole lot of other shelter volunteers too. And that's what happened to Ruth Ann, and that's what happened with Jeff. Billy is here. A Canadian helped Jeff reform the shelter. And that's what happened to me. And I don't mean to suggest that I'm the one that made Austin a no-kill city. In fact, there were people who had started the reform efforts before I got here. But that was my match. That was my match. And what we found out is that there were people all over our community who wanted it just as bad as we were, so long as we were willing to light the first match. But it also takes leadership, because it wasn't enough for us to just sit outside and scream and yell and demand change. It took leadership. In Ithaca, New York, that was this guy. Does anybody know who this guy is? Raise your hand if you know who this guy is. Well, this guy is probably the most important person in animal welfare in America. His name is Nathan Winograd. And he was the person who took the first job when Valerie Hayes and her friends got the shelter director fired. They actually stumbled through a number of other shelter directors until they landed on this guy, a sex crimes prosecutor from California, who decided that it was time for him to do what he really wanted to do, which was prove to America that an open admission animal shelter could be a no-kill city. And he did. On his first day on the job, he went in, he introduced himself, he apologized to Valerie Hayes. She said he's the single only person who ever apologized for her, for them killing her cats. He apologized to Valerie, and he says to his volunteers and to his staff, we're not killing anymore. The killing's over. We're not going to do it anymore. So in the first morning that he's there, his staff comes to him and they say, Mr. Winograd, somebody brought in a litter of puppies. We need you to go decide which dogs to kill to make space for them. And he says, I'm not sure what I didn't communicate this first time, but we're not going to kill anymore. What is plan B? So they go think about it for a while, and they come back and they said, Mr. Winograd, if you're not comfortable deciding who to kill, we're happy to decide who to kill. And he said, I'm not sure what I wasn't clear about. We're not going to kill anymore. What is plan B? So they left, and they came back a few minutes later, and they found a horse trough that wasn't being used, and they put all the puppies in a horse trough in the middle of the lobby, and by the end of the afternoon, all of the puppies had been adopted. That is how the no-kill movement in America started. This is Cheryl Snyder. Yes, she deserves applause. Cheryl is a nurse, was a nurse. That's her background. And Cheryl went to Williamson County Animal Shelter because she cared about animals, but she didn't have a background in no-kill. So she goes to the Williamson County Animal Shelter, and on her first day she says, look, I don't want to kill animals anymore. This is not what I want to do. So she goes to visit Charlottesville, Virginia, which at that point was a no-kill city, and she goes to visit Reno, Nevada, yes, Washoe County, Nevada, which was also a no-kill city at the time, and she learns as much as she possibly can. And instantly, she goes back to her community and starts saving lives, to the point where she went to 90% very, very rapidly, went up to 94, 95. This past year, Williamson County's open admissions shelter saved 97% of every animal that walked through the door. That's what leadership did in Williamson County. This is Sergeant Carl Bailey. Sergeant Bailey was a 22-year veteran of the police force in Seagoville. No animal welfare experience whatsoever. He was voluntold he would be running the animal shelter. And on his first day, he goes into the shelter, and his first act is that he unplugs the gas chamber. And his second act is that he goes to his computer and he Googles how to run a no-kill shelter. And from the very moment that he walked in the door, Seagoville has been a no-kill community because of the leadership of Sergeant Carl Bailey. Kristen Arbach. You're going to hear a lot from Kristen over the course of the next 3 days. Kristen was teaching dinosaur camp to 4-year-olds when she decided to take her first job at an animal shelter, or second job actually at an animal shelter, but the first time she became in the management staff at an animal shelter. And Kristen goes to Fairfax, Virginia, and she helps, along with Leanne and Tawny Hammond, and helps create a no-kill community in Fairfax, Virginia, but Kristen gets bored easily. So a few years later, she moves to Austin with that trio of amazing leaders, and they turn Austin from a 92% community to a 95% community, and Kristen gets bored easily. So then she moves to Tucson, Arizona, and makes them a no-kill community too. She is, to my knowledge, the only leader in America who has worked in 3 open admission, no-kill animal shelters. Thank you, Kristen, for being here. And those kids at dinosaur camp are seriously missing out. I don't know, do you guys know this person? So in Austin, this is a true story. Dr. Jefferson was not on Team No Kill at the beginning. Dr. Jefferson was, in fact, in the group of people that we lobbied, sorry, Ellen, it's the truth, that we lobbied to become No Kill. And my group, Fix Austin, was very much on the outside looking in. And all of the major animal welfare groups, City Council, the ASPCA, all of them were against Austin being a no-kill city. For whatever reason, Ellen decides one day to go to a Nathan Winograd conference. And unlike everybody else on the other side, she is actually wants to hear what this guy is about. And she comes home afterward and she just says, that didn't sound that hard. We can do that. And so she reinvigorates a nonprofit, Austin Pets Alive, that hadn't done anything, had been dormant in many years. And she had the guts to come to me. This could have gone poorly. And say, why don't you help us? Why don't you help us make Austin a no-kill community instead of just demanding that the city do it? And I said, okay. And from that moment on, from the moment that we had our first meeting, we were saving puppies within 30 days. My wife, Sarah, and I did the first off-site adoption for Austin Pets Alive down on South Congress. We went down, we had nothing. We had a little pen. We were in a parking lot. It was hot. We didn't have the faintest clue what we were doing. Ellen arrived with a bucket full of puppies in the back of her pickup truck, handed them to us, gave us some adoption forms, and said, all right, go adopt them out. And we did. We adopted every single one of them over the course of a day. These were puppies who a week previously had been put on the kill list because nobody wanted them. And a week later, they're sitting in front of us being adopted out, puppy after puppy after puppy, for 5 times the cost at the animal shelter. So it wasn't, in fact, that no one wanted them, is that we weren't taking them to the people who wanted them. Dr. Jefferson has gone on to found American Pets Alive, this organization. She is leading the Maddie's Fund Education Center to make future leaders of the movement. I just don't think, I'm sorry, Ellen, to embarrass you, I don't think that there is anybody more important today in making America no-kill than Dr. Jefferson. And thank you for being here, and thank you for what you've done. But as you know, it doesn't just take activists who demand change, and it doesn't just take leaders, because a leader cannot push a boulder up a mountain alone. It takes people who actually do, the people to actually do the work, and the leaders to empower them and to trust them to do the work. This is Ann Lindholm, my friend. Ann was a retiree who, like me, fell for the message, fell for the juice that Dr. Jefferson was selling. And she comes out of retirement. I think she's retired 3 times from Austin Pets Alive, but I could be wrong. But she keeps on coming back, doing more and more for Austin Pets Alive. She ran the dog program. She ran this conference. But without people like Ann, Austin would not be a no-kill city, because it's not enough to have leaders and it's not enough to have activists. You have to actually have people who implement policy changes. This is Cassandra Mensing. Cassandra was in childcare. She was a childcare employee before she started volunteering for Austin Pets Alive, and she found her calling in the bottle baby program. And you're going to hear from her this weekend too. She finds her calling in the bottle baby program. She quickly becomes on staff at Austin Pets Alive, and now she's in charge of American Pets Alive's entire neonatal kitten program. Cassandra is probably personally responsible for saving tens of thousands of bottle baby kittens all over the country. Faith Wright. Is Faith here? Probably not. Faith was a paralegal before she came over, and she has done everything. She has done so many things for Austin Pets Alive that I cannot name them all. But I will tell you this today. When something goes wrong, when shit goes down somewhere in the state of Texas, and they need help, American Pets Alive and Austin Pets Alive sends Faith Wright. Because Faith is going to fix it, and Faith doesn't take anything from anybody. But it takes people like Faith It took people like Faith to make Austin a no-kill community. And this incredibly beautiful woman, who is also my wife, it would have been creepy if that weren't true. And this is my son, Luke. Sarah was a teacher. She was a teacher in Southeast Austin in the worst middle school in Austin, the most dangerous middle school. She had pregnant girls in her classroom. She had students bring guns to school. She was famous for breaking up a knife fight by pulling a fire alarm. She was the kind of person that knows what to do under pressure. And she did that at school, but after mistakenly having lunch with Dr. Jefferson, she agreed to run the CAP program. And for an entire year, I kid you not, Sarah went to work from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. at her day job, and then came home and worked from 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. for Austin Pets Alive, running the CAP program. And she did that because it was the right thing to do as a volunteer. And so it's people like Sarah, Faith, and Cassandra, and Anne. Those are the people that really implement the policies to make no-kill communities. And so you're going to need all three types of people. You're going to need activists, you're going to need leaders, and you're going to need policy implementers. And that is one of the most fascinating things about this honest evaluation of what it took to become a no-kill city. You're probably not going to hear that anywhere else. It took the activists to light the match. It took the leaders to say, follow me, I will show you the way. And it took the policy implementers to actually make it happen. Here's another thing that we learned. We learned that it took these 12 programs to make a community no-kill. And you're going to hear them throughout this conference. But it took life-saving vision and leadership, a large-scale foster program, comprehensive and progressive adoptions programs, community CAP programs, intake diversion, keeping animals out of the shelter, progressive return to owner policies, meaning we will actively seek out the owner. We will not wait for owners to come to us. Large-scale transfer and transport when needed, disease prevention so that you can mitigate and limit the amount of medical expenses that you have to pay. Immediate make-ready, meaning we turn around and make animals available for adoption as quickly as possible. Targeted safety net programs to keep pets in their community. Large adult dog capacity, because as it turns out, as you save more and more and more and more, the last few percent tend to be large dogs. And a euthanasia list, scrutiny and sharing. And I think Dr. Jefferson is going to talk a little bit more about those, but I wanted to throw them up here early so that you saw them now and you'll see them throughout the 3-day conference. Here's what we also learned in our experience, not just in Austin, but everywhere. It takes a leap of faith. And it takes leaders who are willing to take a leap of faith. Leaders who are willing to invest in the community, to invest in people, to turn over the reins to people. The worst thing that you can do if you want to stay lazy is tell Dr. Jefferson you have an idea for something. Because she's going to put you in charge of that idea. And then she's going to let you run with it. And that's what the best leaders do. They believe in people. They believe in community. This animal welfare industry has, until only recently, been about how we can blame the community for what we do. And the no-kill movement takes the opposite tact. It is how can we invest in the community to save the animals' lives. I talked about how every movement begins in darkness, and Austin's movement did too. Austin in 2005, like I said, euthanized 14,304 animals, euthanized 40 animals a day, or one every 12 minutes, and its save rate was 43%. In 2018, they euthanized 240. That's less than one a day. It's about 1 every other day. And the save rate was 98%, counting every animal, noses in, noses out. We are fully transparent in Austin. We do not believe in taking any category of animal and burying them in the data. Everything gets counted. Every animal counts. Full transparency, and you're going to hear more of that from Kristen tomorrow. So we talked about what the absence of hope is at the beginning of this talk. I talked about the absence and the darkness, and the absence of hope and the absence of vision. And so the no-kill movement, what it is, it's the opposite of all of those things. No-kill movement is about presence. The presence of vision, the presence of hope, the presence of compassion, the presence of love for every single animal that walks in the door. The belief that every animal that walks in the door, for whatever reason it walked in the door, has inherent value. We are not going to turn our backs on any animal. That's what the no-kill movement means. And so these are my kids, and I'm going to close with this thought. My kids, they'll never know what it's like to live in a to live in a world in which cell phones do not exist. They will never know what it was like to live in a world in which they couldn't text their friends, they couldn't check their email, whatever the heck Snapchat or all of those other things is. They'll never live in that world. They'll never understand what it was like to live when you couldn't call somebody on your cell phone. In past years, I have given this speech, and at the end of it, right now, I have said that we have to get to a time in America in which shelter killing is no longer an acceptable, societally acceptable method of controlling animal populations. But my friends, we are there. We are already there. The no-kill movement isn't inevitable anymore. It's no longer impossible. It's no longer a date in the future. It's now. There are hundreds of cities all across America that have open admission no-kill animal shelters. And so these kids, they also are never going to have to live in a community in which killing is considered an acceptable method of animal control. And I am damn proud of that. So thank you very much for being here.